New York, 1986. A 7-year-old girl vanishes from a crowded airport terminal while her family waits for an international flight. For 39 years, her family searches desperately. Police find no answers, the case goes cold. Then in 2025, construction workers demolishing an old airport warehouse make a shocking discovery that leads to a DNA breakthrough. Ainsley Radcliffe is finally identified. Her family receives closure they waited nearly 4 decades for, and a killer is brought to justice. How did airport expansion and forensic science finally solve a mystery that baffled investigators for generations? Stay with us as we uncover this tragic case. Hello and welcome to the DNA Archives, where we dive deep into cold cases, missing persons, and the mysteries that DNA finally solves. If you're drawn to stories where persistence meets science and families find peace after decades of uncertainty, you're in the right place. Please hit the like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe so you never miss a case. Now let's go back to where this heartbreaking story began. June 14, 1986, John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. It was a Saturday morning. The terminal was packed with summer travelers, families heading to European vacations, business people rushing to catch flights, the controlled chaos of one of the world's busiest airports. Among the travelers was the Radcliffe family, Ian and Valerie, along with their 3 children. Ian was 42. A British diplomat assigned to the UK consulate in Boston. They had been living in the United States for 3 years. His wife Valerie was 39, an American pediatrician from Connecticut who had met Ian during his previous posting in Washington, D.C. They married in 1977. They had 3 children. The oldest was Sebastian, 11 years old, responsible, and already showing signs of his father's diplomatic temperament. The middle child was Ainsley, 7 years old, with strawberry blonde hair that fell in soft waves to her shoulders, pale blue eyes, and a dusting of freckles across her nose. The youngest was Pippa, just 4 years old, energetic and chatty, constantly asking questions. The family was traveling to London for the summer. Ian's mother was ill, and they were going to spend 2 months with family in Surrey. They had arrived at JFK at 9 o'clock for their noon British Airways flight. Check-in had taken longer than expected. The lines were enormous. Ainsley wore a navy blue travel dress with white collar, white knee socks, black patent leather shoes, and carried a small backpack shaped like a ladybug that contained coloring books and crayons for the flight. She was quiet, sensitive, the kind of child who observed everything but spoke little. She loved drawing and could spend hours creating elaborate pictures of castles and gardens. After checking their luggage, the family proceeded through security, which in 1986 was far less rigorous than it would become in later decades. Metal detectors, X-ray machines for carry-on bags, but no shoe removal, no liquid restrictions, no intensive screening. They made it through without incident, walked to their gate in Terminal 7, the international departures area. Their flight was scheduled to depart from Gate 32. The waiting area was crowded, every seat taken, people sitting on the floor, leaning against walls. Ian found a spot near a large window overlooking the tarmac. Valerie spread out a blanket on the floor for the children to sit. Sebastian pulled out a book. Ainsley opened her backpack and took out her coloring supplies. Pippa wanted to watch the planes. Around 10:30, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. The flight was delayed, mechanical issues. New departure time would be announced shortly. Groans rippled through the waiting area. Ian checked his watch. Valerie tried to keep the children occupied. Ainsley was coloring a picture of a princess in a tower, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, completely absorbed. Around 11 o'clock, Valerie suggested getting snacks for the children. There was a small shop about 50 yards down the terminal. Sebastian wanted to stay with the luggage. He was reading a mystery novel and didn't want to stop. Ian said he would stay too, keep an eye on their spot. The gate area was so crowded that if they all left, they would lose their place. Valerie took Pippa by the hand, told Ainsley to come along, but Ainsley was in the middle of coloring an intricate pattern on the princess's dress. "Mummy, can I stay and finish this? I'm almost done." Valerie hesitated, looked at Ian. The shop was visible from where they sat, maybe 50 yards away. Ian nodded. "She'll be fine. I'll watch her. You'll be back in 5 minutes." Valerie agreed, kissed Ainsley's head. "Don't move from this spot. Daddy's right here." Ainsley nodded without looking up, her hand moving the purple crayon in careful strokes. Valerie and Pippa walked toward the shop. Ian sat in his chair reading the Financial Times. Sebastian was engrossed in his book. Ainsley colored on the floor. The gate area was noisy. Announcements echoing, children crying, adults talking, the constant hum of airport activity. Around 11:10, another announcement. The flight was further delayed, now estimated for 1:30 departure. More groans. Some passengers got up to make phone calls. Others went to find food. The crowd shifted. Ian glanced down at Ainsley. She was still coloring. He went back to his newspaper. Sebastian turned a page in his book. Didn't look up. Around 11:15, Valerie returned with Pippa, carrying a bag with sandwiches, juice boxes, and snacks. She looked down at the blanket where Ainsley had been sitting. The coloring book was there, open to the half-finished princess page. The purple crayon was there, lying on its side. The ladybug backpack was there, still open. But Ainsley was gone. Valerie's heart stopped. Ian, where's Ainsley? Ian looked up from his paper, confused. She's right there, and he pointed to the empty space on the blanket. His face went pale. Where is she? They both stood, looked around the immediate area. Maybe she had gotten up to stretch, maybe she went to look at the planes. Ainsley? Valerie called, her voice tight. No answer. Ian walked quickly through the gate area, checking faces, looking for navy blue dress and strawberry blonde hair. Sebastian put his book down, started helping search, calling his sister's name. Pippa started crying, confused and scared. Valerie ran to the gate desk, spoke to the British Airways agent. My daughter, she was sitting right there, I can't find her. She's 7 years old. The agent immediately picked up the phone, called airport security. Within minutes, Port Authority police arrived. Officers began searching the terminal, questioning people in the gate area. Did anyone see a little girl, 7 years old, blonde hair, navy dress? Most people shook their heads, too absorbed in their own travel stress to notice. One woman remembered seeing a child in a dark dress near the window, but couldn't say when or where the child went. Another passenger thought he saw a man talking to a young girl near the restrooms, but he wasn't sure of the time, wasn't sure it was the same child. By 11:30, airport-wide security was alerted. All exits were being monitored, PA announcements were made. Attention! We are looking for a missing child, Ainsley Radcliffe, 7 years old, blonde hair, wearing a navy blue dress. If you see her, please alert airport personnel immediately. The terminal seemed to freeze. Parents grabbed their own children closer, travelers stopped and looked around. Ian and Valerie were frantic. Ian running through terminals, Valerie sobbing at the gate. Sebastian holding Pippa, who was crying hysterically. By noon, FBI was called. Child abduction from an international airport, this was federal jurisdiction. K-9 units were brought in. They tracked Ainsley's scent from the gate area toward a service corridor, then lost it. Security footage was pulled. 1986 technology meant grainy black and white video. Limited camera coverage. One camera showed Ainsley sitting on the blanket at 11:05. Another camera, positioned near the restrooms, showed a small figure in dark clothing at 11:12, but the image was too poor to confirm it was Ainsley. After that, nothing. She disappeared into the gaps between cameras, into the chaotic crowds of JFK, and was never seen again. The first 48 hours were a nightmare of investigation and false hope. FBI agents interviewed every person who had been in Terminal 7 that morning. Every passenger on the delayed British Airways flight, every employee, every vendor. The man who thought he saw someone talking to a child near the restrooms couldn't provide a useful description. Average height, dark clothes, possibly wearing a uniform. Too vague to pursue. Security footage was analyzed frame by frame, but the gaps in coverage were massive. Whole sections of the terminal had no cameras. Service corridors were completely unmonitored. One camera near a baggage area showed a figure carrying what might have been a child wrapped in a jacket at 11:20, but the angle was wrong, the image too grainy to identify. The service corridor where the K-9 units lost Ainsley's scent led to multiple exits, loading docks, employee parking areas, unrestricted access in the pre-9/11 era. Someone could have taken her through any of those exits and been gone before anyone noticed. Ainsley's photo appeared on national news. CNN ran the story repeatedly. Newspapers across the country carried her picture. A 7-year-old British-American girl, strawberry blonde hair, pale blue eyes, vanished from JFK Airport. Authorities fear abduction. Tips flooded in from across the United States. Someone claimed to have seen a girl matching her description at a rest stop in Pennsylvania. FBI investigated. It wasn't her. Another caller reported a child who looked like Ainsley at a hotel in New Jersey. Agents responded immediately. Again, it wasn't her. By July, 6 weeks after Ainsley disappeared, the case was cooling. The daily news coverage stopped. The massive search efforts scaled back. Ian's diplomatic posting in Boston became impossible to maintain. He couldn't focus on work, couldn't represent his government when his daughter was missing. The UK Foreign Office granted him compassionate leave. The family moved back to England, settling in Surrey near Ian's family. But leaving the United States felt like abandoning Ainsley. Valerie sobbed throughout the entire flight, the same route they were supposed to take together. Sebastian and Pippa were traumatized. Sebastian developed severe anxiety. Pippa had nightmares about monsters taking her away. By 1988, 2 years had passed. Ian resigned from the diplomatic service. He couldn't return to that life, couldn't pretend to care about treaties and negotiations when his daughter was gone. He took a position teaching international relations at Cambridge University, work that kept him busy, but didn't require the emotional energy diplomacy demanded. Valerie couldn't practice medicine anymore. Seeing children in her care reminded her too much of Ainsley, triggered panic attacks that made it impossible to function. She became a medical researcher instead, working in a lab where she didn't have to interact with patients, where she could lose herself in data and experiments. Every June 14th, the anniversary of Ainsley's disappearance, the family held a private memorial at their home in Surrey. They would light a candle, look at photos, tell stories about Ainsley's love of drawing, her quiet observations, her gentle nature. Valerie kept every single drawing Ainsley had ever made, stored them in archival boxes. The unfinished princess from the airport was framed and hung in her office. By 1990, 4 years had passed. Sebastian was 15, struggling with survivor's guilt. He blamed himself for not watching Ainsley more carefully that day. Pippa was 8, the same age Ainsley would have been when she disappeared. Valerie found it unbearable to look at her daughter and realize Ainsley never got to be 8. Ian maintained contact with the FBI, calling every few months for updates. The answer was always the same: no new leads. The case remains open. By 1995, 9 years had passed. Ian was 51, Valerie was 48. They had accepted they would probably never know what happened to their daughter. Ainsley's bedroom in their Surrey home was kept exactly as they had set it up when they moved from the States. Dolls on the shelf, drawing supplies on the desk, her favorite books lined up carefully. Valerie would sit in that room sometimes, trying to feel close to her daughter, trying to imagine what Ainsley would be like at 16, what she would be studying, who she would be becoming. By 2000, 14 years had passed. Sebastian was 25, married, living in London. He had become a solicitor, his way of seeking justice in a world that had failed his sister. Pippa was 18, about to start university. She had decided to study criminology, inspired by Ainsley's case, determined to help other families find answers. Ian published a memoir in 2005, not about his diplomatic career but about loss, about searching, about living with unanswered questions. He titled it Waiting at Gate 32. It became a resource for other families of missing children, a validation of their grief. Valerie threw herself into medical research, made breakthroughs in pediatric diseases, won awards, but told colleagues privately that every achievement felt hollow without Ainsley to share it with. By 2010, 24 years had passed. Ian was 66, Valerie was 63, both aware that time was running out, that they might die without knowing. Advances in DNA technology meant old cases were being revisited, but Ainsley's case had almost no physical evidence, just the coloring book and crayon left at the airport, preserved in an evidence locker. By 2015, 29 years had passed. Ian's health began declining. Decades of stress and grief had taken their toll. He developed heart problems, had a minor stroke. Sebastian and Pippa urged their parents to accept that Ainsley was gone, that they needed to find peace, but how do you find peace with questions that have no answers? By 2020, 34 years had passed. The world had changed dramatically. Airports were unrecognizable from the open chaos of 1986. Security was tight, every person tracked, every movement monitored. The changes came too late for Ainsley, but Ian found some comfort knowing that what happened to his daughter would be much harder to accomplish now. Valerie retired from research in 2022. Her hands too arthritic to work in the lab anymore. She spent her days gardening, reading, trying to enjoy what remained of her life. Ian passed away in 2023 at age 79, his heart finally giving out. He died without ever knowing what happened to his daughter, the question haunting him to his final breath. At his funeral, Sebastian gave a eulogy, spoke about his father's dedication, his refusal to give up, his love for a daughter he lost, but never stopped searching for. By 2024, 38 years had passed. Valerie was 77, living alone in the Surrey house, Sebastian and Pippa visiting regularly, checking on their mother who seemed to be fading. She told them she was ready to die, ready to see Ian again, ready to finally know the truth about Ainsley, whatever that truth might be. Then in February 2025, something extraordinary happened that would change everything. JFK Airport was undergoing massive expansion. Old buildings from the 1980s were being demolished to make way for modern terminals. On February 8th, demolition crews were tearing down an abandoned maintenance warehouse near the old Terminal 7 location. Inside a sealed storage room, behind decades of forgotten equipment and debris, they found something that made everyone stop working immediately. Skeletal remains, small, clearly belonging to a child, wrapped in deteriorated fabric that might once have been a uniform or jacket. And beside the remains, a small backpack shaped like a ladybug, faded but still recognizable. February 8, 2025, the demolition site was immediately secured. New York Port Authority police and FBI arrived within the hour. Dr. Michael Torres, the New York City medical examiner, supervised the careful excavation of the remains from the sealed storage room. The bones were small, fragile, belonged to a child approximately 6 to 8 years old at time of death. The remains had been concealed in a cramped space filled with old maintenance equipment, boxes of outdated airport signage, broken luggage carts. The room appeared to have been sealed sometime in the late 1980s, then forgotten as the airport underwent renovations and administrative changes over decades. Along with the skeletal remains, investigators found scraps of navy blue fabric, white synthetic fibers consistent with knee socks, fragments of black patent leather. The ladybug backpack was deteriorated but intact. When carefully opened, it still contained coloring books, their pages yellowed and brittle, and several crayons, including a purple one. FBI Special Agent Lisa Chen, who now headed the cold case unit for the New York field office, was called to the scene. She had inherited Ainsley Radcliffe's file years ago, reviewed it annually, knew every detail by heart. 7 years old, strawberry blonde hair, navy blue dress, disappeared from Terminal 7 in June 1986, last seen with a ladybug backpack. She looked at the evidence and felt her heart drop. This is Ainsley Radcliffe. The location was significant. The warehouse was less than 200 yards from where the old Terminal 7 gate areas used to be, connected by service corridors that in 1986 were accessible to airport employees. Agent Chen immediately contacted the Radcliffe family. Valerie was 77 now, living in Surrey. Sebastian was 50, a prominent solicitor in London. Pippa was 43, teaching criminology at University of Manchester. Mrs. Radcliffe, this is Special Agent Lisa Chen from the FBI New York office. I'm calling about Ainsley's case. We've found remains at JFK Airport that we believe may be her. Valerie couldn't speak. After 39 years, she might finally know. We need a DNA sample from you to confirm the identity. We can arrange for the U.S. Embassy in London to facilitate collection. Valerie whispered yes, then called Sebastian and Pippa. The three of them met at the embassy the next day. DNA samples were collected from all three. Valerie's maternal DNA, Sebastian and Pippa's sibling DNA, multiple reference points to ensure accuracy. Now came the waiting, but this time it felt different. This time there would be an answer. 2 weeks later, on February 22, 2025, Agent Chen called with the results. Mrs. Radcliffe, the DNA is a definitive match across all samples. The remains are Ainsley. I'm so very sorry. Valerie let out a sound that was both relief and anguish. After 39 years, she finally knew. Her daughter hadn't been taken across the country, hadn't been trafficked internationally. She had been at the airport the entire time, less than 200 yards from where they had been sitting. Agent Chen continued gently. Based on the location and forensic evidence, we believe Ainsley was taken from the gate area through a service corridor to this warehouse. She died shortly after. The cause of death appears to be asphyxiation. The manner of concealment and location suggest this was done by someone with knowledge of the airport layout and access to restricted areas. Do you know who did this? Valerie asked, her voice barely audible. We're investigating, Agent Chen said. We're examining who had access to that area in 1986. We're reviewing employee records and the original case files. The investigation moved quickly. Forensic teams processed the entire warehouse space, documented every detail, searched for any evidence that might identify the perpetrator. They found something significant, a name tag badly corroded but still partially legible. The letters Elson visible, and below it, maintenance crew. Agent Chen pulled employment records from JFK Airport in 1986. Cross-referenced maintenance staff who worked in Terminal 7. One name stood out: Curtis Polson. He had been a maintenance supervisor from 1984 to 1987, responsible for managing service corridors, storage areas, and equipment rooms. He was 41 years old in 1986, had worked at JFK for 6 years, was described by co-workers as quiet, competent, kept to himself. When Ainsley disappeared, Polson had been questioned as part of the massive employee interviews. He said he was working in Terminal 4 that morning, supervising a repair crew. His alibi was supported by work logs. He was cleared and the investigation moved on. In 1987, Polson transferred to LaGuardia Airport, worked there until 1995 when he was fired for what records described as inappropriate behavior toward female staff. No criminal charges were filed. After that, he moved to Florida, worked various maintenance jobs, kept a low profile. Agent Chen tracked Polson through records. He had been arrested in 2001 in Tampa for loitering near a school playground. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. In 2008, he was questioned about the disappearance of a child from a shopping mall in Fort Myers. But again, insufficient evidence. The case remained unsolved. Polson died in 2019 at age 74 from liver failure. He had been living in a cheap motel in Clearwater. No family, no friends, no one at his funeral. Agent Chen requested tissue samples from the Florida medical examiner, samples that had been preserved from Polson's autopsy. The samples were compared to trace evidence found in the warehouse, skin cells on the inside of the ladybug backpack, touch DNA on the fabric that had wrapped Ainsley's body. 3 weeks later, the results came back. Curtis Polson's DNA matched the evidence, there was no doubt. Agent Chen called Valerie with the news. "We've identified the person responsible. His name was Curtis Polson. He was a maintenance supervisor at JFK in 1986. He died in 2019. Valerie felt a complex rush of emotions. Relief at knowing, fury that justice would never be served, gratitude that the truth had finally emerged. She asked the only question that mattered to a mother: did she suffer? Agent Chen chose her words carefully based on the evidence. "We believe it happened quickly. She wouldn't have been afraid for long." It was small comfort, but Valerie held on to it. Investigators pieced together what likely happened. Polson had been working in the Terminal 7 area that morning, had seen Ainsley sitting alone while her parents were briefly away. He approached her, possibly wearing his maintenance uniform, which would have made him seem trustworthy. Told her he would help her find her parents or take her to see the planes up close. Ainsley, trusting and quiet, followed him into a service corridor that connected the terminal to the maintenance areas. He took her to the warehouse, a space he had access to, where he knew he wouldn't be disturbed. What happened there was unclear, but Ainsley died from asphyxiation. Whether from panic, struggle, or deliberate action couldn't be determined. Polson then concealed her body in the storage room, sealed it, and continued working as if nothing had happened. The warehouse was scheduled for renovation in 1988, but budget cuts delayed the project. The room remained sealed and forgotten for nearly 4 decades. For 39 years, Ainsley had been at JFK Airport, in a building her family had probably walked past dozens of times in those first frantic days of searching. Agent Chen spent weeks building a comprehensive profile of Curtis Polson, trying to understand the man who had stolen Ainsley Radcliffe's life. What emerged was a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior that had been overlooked or dismissed for decades. Curtis Polson was born in 1945 in Brooklyn, New York. His childhood was marked by instability. His father abandoned the family when Curtis was 8. His mother worked multiple jobs and was rarely home. He dropped out of high school at 17, enlisted in the Army, served 2 years before being discharged for what records vaguely described as behavioral issues. In 1972, at age 27, Polson was arrested for following a teenage girl home from school. Charges were reduced to disorderly conduct. He served probation. In 1979, he was questioned about loitering near a YMCA where children's swim classes were held. No charges were filed. He was warned and released. In 1980, Polson was hired by the Port Authority as a maintenance worker at JFK Airport. His background check showed only the 1972 misdemeanor, nothing that raised serious alarms. He was reliable, showed up on time, did his work competently. Supervisors described him as unremarkable, the kind of employee who blends into the background. But coworkers remembered details now that seemed significant. Polson used to watch families in the terminals, would find excuses to work near the children's play areas, would volunteer for shifts in family-oriented terminals. One former colleague told Agent Chen that Polson kept a camera in his locker, said he liked to photograph planes, but other workers suspected he was photographing something else. No one reported it. It was the 1980s. Workplace oversight was minimal. Concerns about employees were rarely escalated unless there was concrete evidence of wrongdoing. On June 14, 1986, investigators believe Polson was working his regular maintenance shift in Terminal 7. He had legitimate access to all service corridors, all restricted areas. He would have seen the chaos of the delayed British Airways flight. Hundreds of frustrated passengers crowding the gate area, families spreading out, children running around. He would have noticed Ainsley sitting on the floor coloring, absorbed in her drawing, her parents distracted by the delay and the stress of managing 3 children. When Valerie left to get snacks, when Ian was reading his newspaper, when Sebastian was lost in his book, Polson approached. He may have been wearing his maintenance uniform, carrying tools, looking official and trustworthy. He may have told Ainsley there was a special area where she could see planes taking off up close, or that her parents asked him to bring her to them. Whatever he said, it convinced a quiet, obedient 7-year-old to follow him. Security footage showed Polson's movements that morning. He clocked in at 6 a.m., worked in Terminal 7 from 9 to noon, took his lunch break at 12:15. But between 11:10 and 11:30 there was a gap, 20 minutes where his location couldn't be confirmed. That 20-minute window was when Ainsley disappeared, when Polson took her through the service corridor to the warehouse, when he killed her and concealed her body. He returned to work as if nothing had happened, finished his shift, clocked out at 3 p.m., went home to his apartment in Queens. When FBI agents interviewed airport employees the next day, Polson cooperated fully, showed them his work logs, pointed out that he had been in Terminal 4 all morning according to the paperwork. The work logs were falsified, Agent Chen's team discovered. Someone had signed Polson in at Terminal 4, but he had never actually been there, a co-worker covering for him, or Polson forging the signature. In the chaos of a missing child investigation with thousands of people to interview, this discrepancy was missed. Polson continued working at JFK for another year, walking past that sealed warehouse room regularly, knowing what was inside. In 1987, he transferred to LaGuardia, possibly because the guilt was too much, possibly because he feared eventually being discovered. His firing from LaGuardia in 1995 for inappropriate behavior toward female staff was telling. Multiple women had complained he made them uncomfortable, followed them, made suggestive comments. HR handled it as a workplace conduct issue. He was terminated but not reported to police. No investigation was launched. The pattern continued in Florida, the 2001 loitering arrest, the 2008 questioning about a missing child, always on the periphery of investigations, but never charged. That 2008 case particularly haunted Agent Chen. A 9-year-old girl named Sophia Martinez had disappeared from a Fort Myers shopping mall, never found. Agent Chen contacted Fort Myers PD, requested they review the case with Polson as a primary suspect. DNA evidence from that investigation was being retested. Polson died in 2019 alone, anonymous, taking his secrets with him, but the evidence he left behind was finally speaking. Valerie, Sebastian, and Pippa were informed of everything investigators had learned. Agent Chen flew to London to meet with them in person, showed them the timeline, the evidence, the theory of what happened. Sebastian asked the question that had haunted him for 39 years. Could we have prevented this if I had been watching more carefully, if we hadn't let her stay at the gate alone? Agent Chen was firm in her response, Mr. Radcliffe. This was not your fault. You were 11 years old. Your parents made a reasonable decision in a context that seemed safe. Polson was a predator who chose his moment carefully. He would have found another opportunity if not that day. But the guilt remained. Guilt doesn't respond to logic or reassurance. It lives in the heart regardless of facts. Pippa, who had spent her career studying criminal behavior, asked about the other possible victims. The Fort Myers girl, others who might be connected. Agent Chen confirmed that multiple unsolved cases were being reviewed, that Ainsley's identification might help solve other tragedies, might bring closure to other families. The case received significant international media attention. British and American outlets covered it extensively. The diplomat's daughter who vanished from JFK Airport, finally found after 39 years. Airports around the world reviewed their security protocols.